So welcome 16-bit hockey fans to another dynamite edition of the NHL 94 podcast. I'm your host, Len the Legend, and I have to be on my best behavior today because I have with me an angry person, and he might just drop the glove. And if he does, I'm going to turtle like Claude Lemieux. Angry Jay, thanks for coming on the show. Thanks so much for joining us today.
Thank you for having me. I hope I don't have to keep you too honest, that we could just keep the gloves on and keep this civil.
That's my intention. I'll be a pest, but I can't drop the gloves. I'm a terrible fighter. Hence, I turtle at every opportunity. So, I guess the question is, right off the bat, who the heck is Angry Jay? And why are you so angry?
Well, you see, Angry Jay really, he's nobody. He was actually a friend of mine. He was starting up a band in high school, and we need a name. And they were like punk and, and all this, punk stuff. So I was like, well, let's just be Angry Jay. That's where they came up with it. And so I was like, okay, that's a pretty cool name. And they need like an email address. I was like, yeah, I'll make that the email address for you, because I was in the conversation with them. So I was like, okay, let's just make this. And then they never did anything with it. So I was like, well, if I'm going to go online, I don't want to just be me, because I'm kind of a private person. So it's like, I'll just be this person that has nothing to do with me. And I'll add on my favorite hockey player's number, Doug Gilmour, at the end. And just run with that. So that's where I came from. So I'm not Jay. My name's actually Greg. So
I see you have a cat there too.
Yeah, I have a cat. He likes his attention, so he may pop on as a guest star with me from time to time. But yeah, that's who Angry Jay is, and I just assumed the identity.
Sounds good. Well, if your cat wants to replace me as a host, I'm more than willing just to pass off the headphones to your kitty cat, and maybe he'll do a better job than I. Is it a he or a she?
That's a he. He's pretty cute.
Yeah, maybe he'll do a better job than me.
Not good with conversation, definitely not in leading in a podcast. So let's not put too much pressure on him. It is his first appearance on camera today.
He's doing a fine job. Now, I know you said you want to be private. There may be some people that just want to learn a little bit more about you, because you're kind of a legend in the NHL 94 community. What could you share about yourself in terms of how you came into NHL 94 and started playing it?
So the story is probably fairly similar to a lot of people. My location was just different. So I've been living in California all my life. So I'm almost 40 years old now. I'm getting there, not quite, but close enough to where I was definitely a part of the Wayne Gretzky expansion and influence. So I think when I was about 7 or 8 years old, a guy around the corner from me had NHL 92. So we started playing that first. And see, we didn't really know much about hockey. We thought it was too hard to score on the goalie. So he always asked me before the game, it's like, okay, we're going to pull our goalies. This is the only way we can play, because otherwise we don't score. So like all our games are like 20-16, 22-18. It's just nuts, and he loved being in Detroit. So the first hockey player I learned aside from Wayne Gretzky was Steve Yzerman. Oh. So I don't know who this guy is, but apparently you love him. So it piqued my interest, and I started getting a Sega Genesis just a few months after that. And so like one of the first games I rented was NHL 94, because I enjoyed playing that video game. The San Jose Sharks were pretty new. They were pretty hot. They were like making a playoff push at the same time that I was starting to learn about hockey. So picked up that game, and I was like, this is the greatest thing ever. I don't want to play anything else for the most part. So played NHL 94 a lot. Kind of didn't talk to that person too much longer after that, so I didn't really have anyone to play the game with. And there wasn't a lot of hockey fans in California, especially where I was, because it's just like Central Valley. We weren't really that close to the Bay Area or LA. So a lot of computer games for me versus CPU as I was growing up. I tried NHL 95. Try to trick myself into that being a better game, and I just couldn't get there, because all those single player functions were actually much more beneficial to me, because I didn't have anybody to play with for the most part. I could have occasionally talked someone into playing a couple games, and then they'd lose interest for whatever reason. So I played 94 for probably 6-7 years up until I got a PlayStation, and kind of moved on to NHL 99, and went through college. And one day I was just looking at a laptop after I drove my friend to his apartment by his college, and just typed in NHL 94 randomly into a search engine. I'd never done it before by that point. And I landed on NHL94online.com. Mm-hmm. And I'm just completely blown away. There's online leagues, there's information about the game posted, there's forums. I was completely blown away. So I got home like at midnight, and first thing I did the next morning was, okay, let's learn more about this. How do I get online? How do I play? Can I play just regular games without getting into a season? So that was the start. Basically, I've been online playing for 17 years now, on and off.
Holy.
I signed on to the forums in 2006 for the first time. So that was just the beginning, I suppose. And I've never really looked back. It's opened so many doors for me that I could have never pictured what may have happened after finally getting to play people online and play with another person in this game on a regular basis.
It's truly incredible to do that, especially now in 2024, and it's relatively easy to do so. You could easily find a game, you go on Discord and just pop a note, pop a message on there, Xe, and people will be DMing you left and right looking to play. It's pretty incredible. But I want to take you back almost 30 years when NHL 95 came out. I want to hear your thoughts. What was it about that particular game that it didn't resonate with you? Because a lot of other people in my shoes, I talked about it negatively at length, but I want to hear somebody else's opinion on it. So tell me why you didn't like it all too much.
It just doesn't feel the same. It's clearly not the same game, especially feel wise. And the feel of 94 is everything. There's so many things that are simple about it, but the depth that you can get into it's just unparalleled. 95, you don't have that same kind of depth because goalie control is different. The goalie takes up more space in the net. So that head game is a little bit different. The skating isn't as clean. The puck handling isn't as clean. The passing isn't as clean. I feel like there's more cheese goals in 95 where you can just go around the net and the goalie gets screened by all of those defensemen and they just it's just chaos on that one post and then the other side is just wide open. It's just the graphics weren't as good. I thought, they looked sleeker, sure, but they looked kind of awkward, I thought. Whereas 94, everybody just... They were more appealing blobs, I thought.
No, that's fair. That's fair. And, you share a lot of the same concerns I have. I mean, the cheesiness of the goals, that, to be honest, it didn't bother me because I didn't play it, I don't think, enough to really get into that it bothered me. Just, you're right. The engine was different. The graphics were different. And in my eyes, it was a regression in the series more than a progression, which is too bad. Now, going back even further, the original NHL 92 that you mentioned that you originally played with your friend, have you picked it up anytime recently? Because I have. And although there are some similarities with NHL 92 and NHL 94, the goalie is so much smaller in 92. I'm not sure if you remember that.
It's kind of an accurate reflection because goalies were smaller in 1992. You could be 5'8" and you could be a goalie. Today, if you're 5'8", you're playing ECHL if you're lucky because these guys are all monsters. But
yeah.
I really enjoyed 92. I have gone back to it. We actually had a league 4 or 5 years ago, I would say, online, 92. And it's a really fun game because it's just fast. It still has that 94 in it at heart, but it's just it's a fast game. There's no weight bug. So guys that should hit actually do hit. And there's a lot of posts. It's like Super Nintendo with how many posts there are. So even if the goalie's not making the saves, you still have 2 pretty stout posts to stand tall for you, in those sticky situations. But it actually was just in Japan a few months ago, and I went searching for NHL 94 cartridges and EA Hockey cartridges. So it's the Japanese version of NHL Hockey. It's called EA Hockey. I did find one copy in Tokyo. It wasn't boxed. It wasn't complete. It's just the cartridge. So I picked that up and hope to just play with that. It has all the national teams, so like Poland and Luxembourg and Spain and Portugal and obviously United States, Canada, USSR, Finland, Sweden, all those. But they have like these goofy countries in there too from Europe. It's like, really? Luxembourg has a team? I don't know about that.
They're probably for Canadian expats that they somehow got a Luxembourg citizenship or something like that. Because I know the Italian hockey team, at least in years past, was like that. But is that playable on a North American version of Genesis, or is it not?
I haven't tried it. I've heard mixed results on the internet that, it depends on like the model maybe you have of the Genesis and it can fit or it won't. The cartridge, won't fit. So I haven't tried it yet. But basically the rosters are all the NHL hockey rosters. They just have certain teams that you become a country essentially.
Yeah.
So you still have Gretzky, Robitaille, Sandstrom. I think they're Canada or something, and then the rest of the teams are just whatever country I guess would be accurate. So you'd have like San Jose as Luxembourg, for example, because you wouldn't
Yeah.
expect much from them.
In terms of video games, you said you moved on to computer games. I mean, I'm curious which ones were your favorite when after eventually shelved your Genesis and your PlayStation. Because I'm curious, there's been a glut of great games for both of us when we grew up. I'm a few years older than you, but I'm curious to hear which ones piqued your interest and which ones do you like to play.
I think I may have misspoken when I said computer games. I've mostly played console games.
Gotcha. Okay.
I've actually stepped away from a lot of sports games, I'd say, over the last decade because I feel like they were less enjoyable to play. That's why I continue to go back to 94, especially just because of I think they did it right back then. So games I play now, I kind of dabble into everything. Like I like playing Yakuza. I like playing Final Fantasy. I'll play Devil May Cry. I'll sometimes go into Street Fighter and get whooped up when battles there, but it's just something I enjoy. So I've been trying to stay into more action games and those type of things. Like I was playing Hollow Knight for a long time and some other games just to keep the fingers nimble because at the higher level of 94, you have to have quick reflexes. And as we get older, it's more difficult to keep those reflexes around because some of these guys, man, they're nasty out there. They see plays so quick and then they make them happen, in the blink of an eye that it's important to have high dexterity. So I try to maintain that to a certain level.
In terms of them perfecting your skills, people would say, you might be one of the best, or if not one of the best Genesis players out there. Your track record certainly speaks for itself. What would you suggest for somebody that wants to improve their NHL 94 skills and their ability to play the game? What should they do in order to advance to the next level?
Just watch with purpose. Don't necessarily, if you want to get to the next level, don't watch to be entertained. Like, oh, that was such a great game. Like, understand why that game was great or what happened in a certain juncture of that game that really changed things and turned it into a great game. So watching people, how they score, how they play defense, how they play goalie, the way they pass the puck, when they pass the puck and why. Just there's so many aspects of this game to acquire that it can be intimidating. So just try and focus on one thing at a time. Whether it's, learning how to break out from your defense more effectively, how to change up your offensive flow and maybe not be so focused on one-timers or slap shots, kind of switch things up. Just focus on one thing at a time and get to a place where you feel comfortable that you feel made progress and then start to cultivate other things in your game. Because if you try to just take on everything at once, it's too much. There's too many things too many nuances to master. So you just have to be patient. You have to play a lot of games. You have to watch a lot of games. And the great thing about this community is that you can ask anybody a question. And try and get more information about, I'm doing this out on the ice, but you seem to be able to handle what I'm doing, or you do this. Why do you do this? And then a person will type out an explanation to you like, okay, here's what I'm seeing. And here's what I would suggest you may look into doing. So yeah, just get involved and just kind of use all the resources we have available to us.
What would you suggest about playing against a computer? Because a lot of people would initially, I guess, an outsider would maybe scoff at that because somebody may say that you're not going to be able to perfect your skills simply playing the computer over and over again. Do you find there's any value in playing the computer, or is it worthwhile just to focus solely on playing another person?
There's definitely value in playing the computer because you could learn how the rest of the game interacts with you on it. There's 12 players on the ice. When there's no penalties, you control one. So there's 11 players out there reacting to what you're doing, and the more you learn about how those other 11 players react to where you're skating, when you're making your passes, while you're holding the puck, if you're using your right winger to attack down the left winger, if you're going down the center or the right, if you stop up at a certain point in the rink, like if you stop up at the blue line, how does everybody react? If you stop up inside the blue line, how does everybody react? So just learning how the AI interacts with everything else that you're doing, you can anticipate where these guys will be in a game. And then when you go play human, you can go, okay, I've seen this situation similarly before when I play the computer. I'm recreating here. I expect a guy to be in this spot. you may not have to see them on the screen. You could just anticipate like they're going to come from off the screen onto the screen, and they're going to be there. And you make that pass, and they show up, and you just tap in a goal or you make a play. It's very rewarding. So there's plenty of value in computer stuff, playing the computer only. And then I still play the computer occasionally when I have time. I've been trying to work on my pass shots, and I find it as just a organic way to try and work pass shots into natural plays. I see a lot of people use save states, and I don't think there's anything wrong with that because you get the repetitions where you just, okay, same shot over and over and over and over again, and you get better at just the timing and that mechanism. But I prefer to have the pass shots come up organically in a game. Like, okay, I'm cutting across the defenseman here. I happen to have a pass shot. Let's try it. And then you just experiment from there. So I'm not hammering away hundreds of pass shots all at once, but I feel like the ones that I'm doing on my own time are more valuable because I can easily just go put that into a game somewhere and go, okay, I've made this move before. I've seen where this defenseman is and how there's an opening, and okay, let's try it. And it works or it doesn't. So there's so much value in playing with the computer.
It's gotta hurt to be in the receiving end of a goal of a pass shot. Is it not? I mean, when seeing that take place and then all of a sudden your goalie gives, it must be disheartening to have that happen, right? I mean, am I marking up the wrong tree here? Or?
No, you're 100% right. I spent so many years online, just sometimes outwardly, sandbagging these things like, man, these are just the worst things ever. They break the game. I hate them. They can't react to them, blah, blah, blah. After time, you get over that initial, like, I hate this play, and you find ways to how to stop it. I mean, because there are ways to stop it, or to even prevent the opportunity from arising. And then you eventually get to the point where we go, you know what? I'm just going to try them too and see if I can score them and make the other guy miserable instead of myself. Just give him the same medicine back. And I'd say it took me about 15 years to be willing to even try pass shots.
Holy cow.
In the last couple of years, I've worked them in.
Look at the progression from hating it initially to then trying to defend against it to the point where now it's part of your repertoire. It's quite a progression to where you are in terms of the pass shot. And now, I hate when I see that happen, especially giving up a goal like that. Thankfully, I haven't yet, but I would imagine it's got to absolutely suck. But I do have to ask you, though, a question with creating lines, because you've done a lot of posts, videos, you've done a lot in terms of creating lines. I'd love to pick your brain initially. Just, this is a very broad question. If you could rank the skills from top to bottom, just what is the best skill you think a player should have? If they have, if they're top of the class, what would be it? And which, if you could rank them, I'm curious how you'd rank the order of all these skills.
Oh, that's a great question. Well, I would say speed and skating are probably number one, because if you can't get to a spot, then you're never going to be able to use the skill that you have. Is
that agility and speed?
Right. So agility and speed, I would probably put at number one. I'd probably put speed first, but agility is right there because agility is very important. Second, I'd probably put weight, because weight determines what you're able to do with the player, like how you want to play with them. If they're a big, heavy guy, they go down more easily to checks. So you don't want to have the puck on their stick for too long. So it kind of dictates what kind of player you want, because if I have a guy that's just stick handling, passing, skating, but he's big, then I'm having to use him in a way that's very difficult for him to be used because he's just very easy to check. If you're very small, if you're a little guy, you don't have to have all these skills. As long as you can skate, you can play defense at the very least. So I would say weight is also a big deal. And then you get into the actual skills. So I'd probably go stick handling first, shot power, then passing, then shot accuracy. And then awareness is just like this big unknown fog that we all think, oh, if he has a high offensive awareness, he does this. Or if he has high defensive awareness, they just never go play offense. They just sit back in front of the net. They're always available for you to take control of, and they're always in good positions. Like, we don't know. We think they may help certain things. And then we also learned in the recent documentary they did on Angryjay93 that it's kind of like spheres, like of influence. Like they're aware of things from further away, or things like that, or that they make passes to, people within that sphere. Like there's more people available to pass to accurately, kind of like that vision cone in Madden 06 that everybody hated. It's like, okay, well, if you put your vision cone on this guy, you're going to make a really nice pass over there. But if you try to pass it to the other guy over there, who knows what's going to happen. So you could put awareness anywhere you want because we don't know. But I'd go skating, weight, and then your stick skills, shot power. So, and then checking's kind of AI related. It's nice to have. It's not a high priority.
Checking is the aggression in terms of how often the computer is going to be checking. Am I correct in that?
Right. So if you have Ray Bork, who's the 6 rated checker or 100 rated checker overall, he's just going to do a lot of checking. Whereas a guy who doesn't really check very much, like Matt Sundin, who's very low check rating, he's not going to be anywhere near as aggressive.
Now, you said you put a lot of emphasis on speed and agility. Now, Paul Coffey has a heck of a lot of speed, but there's, maybe Lidstrom has a lot of agility. So which of the two would you rather start, given each of their two attributes?
For a very long time, I would have said Lidstrom because he's lighter, he's easy to handle, he doesn't really get himself into a whole lot of trouble. Excuse me. But he also doesn't create a lot of plays. You give the puck to Paul Coffey, and he's a fourth forward. It opens everything up because then you can just kind of let your 3 forwards in computer mode just do whatever they're doing to try and get open, and then you have this guy who's just kind of unlocking everything. You're attracting defense away from your forwards with an extra forward essentially, and it just kind of opens up these doors. He's a little tricky to use because he is a very heavy player, but he has excellent skating, so he can elude players more easily, and he also has high stick handling, so he can also shrug off checks more easily when they do connect. So I would definitely ice Paul Coffey these days. I even bench Lidstrom in certain matchups because Jason's a perfectly fine defenseman as well. And sometimes it's nice to have another guy back there who's heavier to play with Lidstrom based on what the other team has coming forward. So
I guess sorry.
There's always a lot of things to be, contemplating when determining who to ice and even where to ice them.
So Dallas Drake, it would probably be somebody you slot in as a forward if you're going to be playing Coffey, as a way to try to, take advantage of the weight bug, and just to try to, keep the other team in check. You have then a checking forward out there that could really lay the lumber, so to speak, when the time is needed.
You very well could. There's not a lot of forwards for Drake to check though in common Detroit matchups at the higher. Once you get into tournaments where you talk about tiers, it's like, okay, yes, if you're playing in classic league online, you'll play all the teams in the league, so you may have larger difference in matchup and quality of teams. When we're talking about tournaments, Dallas Drake might not be as useful because a lot of the teams that he's going up against, he can't really even check those players, so he's kind of useless almost to a point, because he doesn't have the offensive skills to carry him if his defense isn't there. And if you can't check anybody, then he's not ideal in a lot of cases. But if you play something against some of the lesser teams, Dallas Drake could be a nice complement with Paul Coffey. Absolutely.
Phil Housley, then he must be one of your favorites, given his skating and his ability just to lug up the puck from his own end.
Yeah, Phil Housley is one of my favorite players. He's one of the more perfect players. I think he's lighter than Coffey, so he skates a little bit better, even though they have the same ratings, because the lighter a player is, the better they skate. He also absorbs more checks. He just doesn't shoot the puck as well, but that's okay. He does everything else really well. I'd say he's probably one of my top 5 favorite players to play within the game. Just he does it all. Even if you get stuck up on the other team's goal line and you lose the puck with him, he can still get back on defense. He's like Bobby Orr out there. He can skate circles around most of the players in the game.
Name your top 5. You said Housley's on your list of top 5. I want to hear who your other 4 guys are that you like to play with.
Definitely Pavel Bure is my favorite player by far. He does it all, and I think he's underrated. And I'm on an island about Pavel. People put him in their top 5, sure, but he's my clear-cut number 1. It's not even close. And then
he can't shoot though. He's just in comparison to other guys that you're gonna put in this god tier. I'm playing devil's advocate here. He can't shoot.
He has a shot power. It's just the accuracy's not quite as good, but I don't care. Like, he's gonna get so many chances because he's so good at getting the puck back that you're eventually gonna score anyways, I think. I'd probably put Yzerman at 2, Roenick at 3, Housley at 4. And then 5, I guess McGillney. I mean, McGillney's a lot of fun to use, but he's not very good on defense. It's very difficult to get the puck back with him. So, but he's excellent when he has the puck on his stick. I mean, it's hard to argue with that. But that'd probably be my top 5.
Why is he a defensive liability?
He's not a very good checker, unless it's a very heavy player he's trying to check. And he's so fast and so agile that sometimes using these little minute movements to try and shadow people with, to try and pin him up against the boards or put him into situations where it's easier to poke check them, or perhaps something like that. He's very difficult to handle in tight windows. Whereas Bure's a little bit easier, I think, because he's a little bit lighter. He can move around a little bit more elegantly in those smaller areas. And then Phil Housey is just he's perfect out there. So I love using him for those type of things.
Do you agree that the 3 best goalies in the game are the ones that are ranked the highest? Roy, Belfour, and Fuhrer? Are you in agreement with that?
Absolutely. And there's a clear tier break between Belfour and Roy, and then Fuhrer. He's definitely a step down. And then another step down would be, the rest of the players, Potvin and Joseph and so on.
So rank a few of them. I'm curious, who would you say would be the best, say 2, 3, or 4 of that next group? And why would they be? Why would you rank them that high?
Well, I'd probably put Potvin up there. Essensa. Just trying to run through the goalies real quick in my head. Soderstrom, I would put up there quite a ways. Basically, I want lighter guys because they're easier to use in goalie control. They stop faster, they start faster. Barasso's nice in goalie control, like when you just leave him alone because he's pretty solid. But when you try to move him around, he's so heavy, it takes him a minute to get started. So when he's trying to shut down that tiny little window in the goal and you got McGillney coming up on you, he has a much harder time getting there. Whereas Soderstrom or Essensa, they're so light, they can get there.
How about Andy Moog?
Moog is great. He's probably another step below Essensa, Soderstrom level, but Moog's one of the better manual goalies to use in the game. Absolutely, he's underdrafted, I think.
Oh, there's an inside scoop for people that want to know a little bit more about the game. Now, I'd love to pick your brain. What makes you absolutely crazy about this game? Something that just drives you nuts, people do, or there's something that's part of the game that just drives you absolutely bonkers. I'd love to know what it does, like which one it is for you.
So first, it was EA specials. Those drove me nuts.
What do you mean the EA specials?
The shots where you just float them up onto the goalie, they rebound, the goalie goes way off into left field, and then there's a wide open net.
Yeah.
So those drove me up the wall at first. I know a good buddy of mine, EA Eric Anthony. He came onto the scene the same time I did, 17 years ago. And we played a lot of games early on, and he did EA specials. Those drove me up the wall so fast. He would win the game with one of those. I would log out of AOL Instant Messenger, and I'd go off to soccer practice or something. Like, I got to go forget this. I can't handle this. And then it was pass shots. Those drove me up the wall too. And then people checking immediately off the faceoff also drove me up the wall at first because, I got the puck off the faceoff. Next thing I know, I'm already on my back because the other guy checked me right away and I lose the puck. So I was like, it's not, why did I win the faceoff? That wasn't beneficial. I wish I would have just gave it to you so I could knock you over.
Yeah.
These days, I don't like goalie dives drive me crazy. People who just dive from their crease and try and get 20 feet out to you. It's like, yeah, that worked, but that's not sustainable long term. Stop doing that.
It's a risk. It's a high risk, and you could get absolutely lit up if the guy goes around you. But
yeah,
it works. It works. It's spectacular when it doesn't work because you can just stymie like even a breakaway if you do it right, and just
it works often enough. And you sit there, you go, man, that guy just dove on me. I feel so silly I didn't score on that because the goal's so wide open over there and I couldn't do anything about it. And then you try to counteract that. It's like, I'm going to just shoot earlier. And then he just stands there. Yeah. With the goalie and like, I didn't dive. So, too bad for you.
Those EA specials, is there a way to consistently score on with those? I mean, I haven't played the game enough, I guess, to figure that out, but maybe you could give some shed some light on this. So is there like, are you able to, if I ask you right now, give you the puck and the controller in your hand, can you do one of those and execute it?
More than likely not. I mean, it's not 100% tactic, but it's reliable enough to where I use it a lot. I probably use it the most out of anybody in the scene right now. Yeah, I started incorporating those, I'd say 3-4 years ago, and I will try them anytime anybody gives me an opportunity to do so. And basically what you want to do is you want to have a good angle on the wing. You want to have a player on his off wing. Usually that helps a lot. You can do backhand EA specials, but they're very difficult and much less consistent. What I do is I generally don't hold a direction on the shot. When I release it, I just hit the shoot button, and then the puck will bounce off the goalie, and then I'll go skate after it and try to not push it in short side to the empty part of the net. And it's fairly consistent. I can do it from some pretty weird angles, like very quick timing. But then a lot of people use their manual goalie to kind of counteract that. So you have to, that's another head game. That's why this game's so great. That's why I continue to go back to 94 is that, you figure out one thing. It's like, oh, I'll just go try and do something else to react to that and build off the game that way. And, it's like a chess match. You can get pretty heady out there.
Ever make anybody rage quit?
Yes.
Lay it out. What's the scenario? What happened? You don't have to name names. Just like,
yeah, no names. I've had people. It happens a lot less now. Back when we were a lot less friendly with each other, like when we didn't have live tournaments to meet each other at, it was much more. There was a lot more, like, and I don't know, but not anxiety, but like tension between people. It's like, oh, we never have to see each other. We can just be crazy internet people and be toxic. And you just do these toxic things in the game, and then people would rage quit and go on the big thing, and the other guy would just egg them on more, and you turn into a big kerfuffle on the forums. That happens so often. It doesn't happen these days so much. Everything's so chill. Like we've all just gotten into our old man stages where we're just like, yeah, everything's cool. You're great. I can't wait to see you in like 3 months. You can do whatever. I don't care. Because I know at the end of the day, we could have a beer and shake hands and like everything's great. So there's very few rage quits. And a lot of the people that do that type of thing, they don't last in the community for very long. The people that we have now and the people that come and stay are all very positive people. They're easy to get along with. They want to learn. They want to have fun. They want to just play good games. And I don't see it a lot, and I try to stay away from playing very, very new people. I want to let them get established first and get some confidence and let them play the game and play people in their level and eventually kind of make that progression, because that's what I did when I started playing. I didn't go, well, who's the top person on the leaderboard? Let's go after him. Like, no. It's like I pretended it was a ladder. So I started at the bottom rung, paid my dues, learned, went to the next one, paid my dues, learned, and just went up like that. It was a lot quicker to do back then because we were all pretty new to the scene. Back then, 2006, the scene had only been around for a year or two, so it was easier to climb up and learn. And, these days, I feel like if I go out and try and find someone and then do these cheesy EA special pass shots, goalie dives, and terrorize them, that I feel like I would have done the community a huge disservice. So but if they want to like have conversations or ask tips, like, oh, I read your article online, I saw your video, I have questions, like I'm more than happy to be a resource then and talk to them. And if they even want to play, like, oh, I just want to see, or let's just play a game. Like if they come to me and ask for it, that's one thing. If I go out and find them, I feel like that's a terrible thing to do as someone who wants to be an ambassador.
You just ruined my day, because I hope I was going to play you today and see if I could hold you to under 25 goals, but I guess that's not going to be the case, given that we've never really. I'm kidding. I'm not going to play you. You don't want to play me. It would be if you asked, we could play, and
no, I'm not happy to.
No, we're not going to do that. I'm not going to put you through the pain and suffering of that.
No,
But yeah, I mean, you look at his thumb here, the callus I have built up, and that's from years and years of playing NHL. No, I'm kidding. Are you still doing videos? Because last I checked on your YouTube channel, it's been several years that there's been anything posted on there. I mean, are you doing it? If not, where are you doing it?
So doing the videos was something I've, in the back of my head wanting to do. I'm not very technically savvy, so getting those videos that I had up there was difficult for me, even just to begin with. And then I have other things that kind of also occupy my time, and I also changed jobs into a governmental job, so I try not to be online in the video capacity more than I want. Even more so, like I don't mind getting online and joining a stream or doing this type of event, but like I feel like the more you put yourself out there, the more you can leave yourself open to other things. So I just try to get in these situations where I think it's comfortable. We're like in a group setting, and we can just it's more of a fun thing than me just like talking in it to who knows who.
That's fair. No problem. So I just have to pick your brain on this because I should have asked it earlier. The A pass or A button, when you have the puck and you press the A button, that puck goes flying. Have you ever found a way to take advantage of this as an offensive weapon? Or is this, is just strictly like still just some utilitarian purpose?
It's not useless. One of the things I do is I like to experiment with the game, especially when we had COVID. It gave us so much more time to do these sort of things. And I think it was during COVID, it was like, what if I just hit the A button from the neutral zone, like pretend it's a dump it? And what happens? How does everybody react? How do not only just the computer reacts, but how do people react in trying to defend it themselves? So I found that it can be useful. It can be like a nice change up, a change of pace to where you just chuck it down there. Like if you're having issues passing the puck in a game, or if you're having issues cracking defense, like they're pushing up on the blue line, they're meeting you in the neutral zone to try and take you out, and they're being successful doing that. What I like to do is dump it in once I cross the red line, and then watch those defenders just go up into nothingness, and then watch my forwards skate in, because they all skate in at that point, and they usually go to pretty good spots. And if the defensemen are just gone, then you have all sorts of open ice once you get the puck back. So it can be useful in that type of indirect capacity. I haven't found too many direct passes where the A flip pass will be beneficial in any sort of way, but I think there is some use to it, kind of just as like a change up, because a lot of guys don't expect that type of play to happen.
Yeah, between not just only that, using it on the offensive side of things, I find also on defensively, at least the people that I play with, nobody tends to use the A button to hook or hold or whatever to try to slow people down. Yeah, I think it's a fairly effective way of just taking somebody's timing off and just almost shutting down a rush. Especially if you're a fast guy, you hold him, you continually hold him. It's a pain being on the other side of things, but it's effective. And do people tend to use that on a higher level for using the hold for games when you guys play?
You're absolutely right that it can be effective. There is one player who will utilize A button hooks and holds, and that's Whalers might win. He's a fairly high level player. Like he will occasionally get into the A level, so he's he definitely has plenty of skill, and he's been around for a while, and he's learned a lot of things. And one of the things that he likes to do is try and hook and hold people, and it does throw off the timing. Like I've had guys DM me like, this Whalers guy, he won't stop hooking and holding me. What do I do? How do I get this guy off me? He's bugging the hell out of me with this strategy. And so I talked to them about it, because I feel like there's a way around it. You just can't skate right into the guy, because that's what he wants you to do. He wants you to skate right into him because that's what he's expecting, and he's going to do something about it. And I personally will use the hook and holds myself. I think out of most everybody else, I'm probably using it the second or third most. I usually only use it for very specific reasons, but I started using it more once we had the NHL 92 online season, because I had a very small team that couldn't check at all. The only thing I could do was sit there and hold people and just make their life miserable until the puck magically flipped off their stick.
Which team did you use, by the way? I'm curious.
Montreal.
They are notoriously lightweight in that game. Yeah.
Yeah, but they skate amazing. So if you can hold these people, that are attacking your team, all of a sudden Montreal becomes a defensive juggernaut, because they can skate and just get in people's way. And I noticed 92, there was a wider radius in which you could hook and hold people than there is in 94. So 92 holds are more effective than 94, but 94 is still effective enough to where you can use it. And what I've noticed is, like, say I go to try and check somebody, but they don't go down, like they do the little dance move, but they still hold on to the puck. That means you can't check them again with that same player.
I didn't know that.
Yeah, you can't check the same player twice in a row with the same guy. So somebody else has to hit somebody on anywhere on the ice, or you could take that guy and hit somebody else, and then you can go back to that guy. But that's impractical with how fast things occur on the ice. So when those situations happen, and I don't really have another available defensive option, or I know that now that the guy can make a play to try and score a goal, I'll use the A button to hook and hold. That's like my last line of defense, where I can't do anything with a B check, poke check, or a C check, body check to do anything about it, because the game won't allow me at this point. So that's when I'll use the hooks and the holds, and because they're very useful in that regard.
What about poke checks? So you just mentioned it. I'm curious, is that a strategy you tend to employ, or is it something that's just on the back shelf? You don't tend to use it all too much.
I definitely use it a lot, especially if players are of similar weight, or especially if they're similar weight, because it's difficult to do regular checks or the CB bug checks where you can actually check with the heavier player to take down a lighter player. But if they're the same exact weight or within one of each other, I tend to do more poke checks because it's just safer, and it also maintains your position better on defense. So even if it's a situation where I could body check, it's like a way to hold your ground and not commit your defenseman completely. Because if you miss a body check and you miss it the wrong angle, they're gone. You'll never see that player again. And then you have to scramble. And against some of these other guys, if you're scrambling, they'll make you pay for it.
Yeah, they'll take the slightest opportunity, turn it to advantage, and that's a goal. And then that's a really good analysis. Screenshots, do they mean anything in NHL 94? Having a defenseman or a few people in front of the goalie, does that hinder the ability of the goalie to make a save in any way, shape, or form?
It's funny you mention that. So on Super Nintendo, slap shots are harder, but we tend to believe that if there's a screen in front of the goalie, or two, that's even better, that slap shots become a higher percentage option in terms of being successful. And then in Genesis, we're also panicked about the slap shot in general because it's much easier to score with, that I don't even think we're paying attention to who's screening or not screening that, to be perfectly honest. We're also scared that it's going to go in anyways, regardless, that we're all rushing to play manual goalie to try and stop it, via that option. So that's a great question that I don't think we have a good answer to in Sega Genesis, especially.
I guess it's over time we'll figure that out. And so, do you ever notice playing the game? Just at least for me, it seems like the game is hard coded in a way to give one team an advantage for a short period of time, because there are times in the game I can't get the puck out, I can't make a pass. There's nothing I could do. Do you notice this? And do you think that the game is hard coded in such a way just to give a team an advantage for a brief period of time, or is just something in my head?
It's in all our heads at the very least. I don't know if it's something hard coded, but there are games where you use, like, let's say you pick Boston. In one game, they look amazing. Next game you play exact same way, they look fine. They look normal. They do regular stuff. You pick them up again, you do the same thing. They're god awful. They can't make a pass. They can't skate straight. The goalie can't stop anything. The defensemen are screening the goalie for the other team. You just go to the penalty box all game long. Guys can't hold on to the puck. Whatever it is, those things definitely happen. I think it's kind of a roll of the dice, personally. Whatever you may get, and you just have to kind of work with whatever the roll of the dice is. There's been some games where I've seen a team, or I've had a team where it's like, I can't do anything right. Just want this game to be over with. And you just try to grind it out. And sometimes it works. A lot of the times it doesn't. But yeah, seeing the passes bounce off your guy's skate or off your guy's stick to somebody else for a quick goal, those are very frustrating. And it feels like it can add up very quickly. Like you can dig yourself your own hole so quickly and get yourself into a bad place when you see one or two of those happen. It's like, oh, my team's terrible. Maybe they aren't, but maybe they are. We don't know. That's the scary thing. You just kind of almost have to put it out of the back of your mind. Like, okay, they stink. How do I play with a stinky team?
the Pittsburgh Penguins. They are, I suppose, amazing in SNES because the weight bug doesn't exist there. But in Genesis, have you found a way to make them to be a viable team? Just because they have two guys, Lemieux and Yager, which they should be world-class players, like Lemieux is in terms of his stats, his attributes. But I can't use him. He's just too darn heavy. And it gets every time somebody sneezes on him, he falls down. Have you found a way to make them actually a viable team to use?
Yes and no. If I had them in a tournament, I'd be okay with it because then they're playing against a team of similar caliber. So it's not so bad. If you take them into a league where all teams are available to use and you try to take them against Detroit and Chicago and LA, oh, that's a nightmare.
Even Vancouver would just destroy them given their lightweight guys.
Vancouver would be terrible because they're so fast.
Yeah.
There are ways to use Pittsburgh effectively. Yes. A lot of it has to do with Lemieux. You bring in Joe Mullen. Their defense is actually pretty good as is. They're pretty smart. They close down a lot of passing lanes on their own. Barrasso's fairly solid. So they at least have that part figured out. You could play defense with them. You could try and make the game very, very slow, but scoring with Pittsburgh can be troublesome at times because Yager's not a very good shooter. He's actually a rather poor shooter. He does everything else pretty nicely, but he can't shoot. And then they don't really have a puck carrier to bring the puck up the ice effectively because Mullen's very slow, even though he's very light and he can possibly carry the puck up the ice. So I find that getting the puck up the ice, creating enough chances, to even get 3 or 4 goals against those top teams can be very difficult. But they can also be very dangerous because if they're on, they clearly have, Lemieux. He's the highest rated player in the game. You get him some space, he's going to take advantage of it. So you would expect to be able to beat them, but they're very scary when they do get their chances because of Lemieux and Mullen. He's also a good shooter, but like the rest of their forwards all have a huge list of problems attached to them. So it's like you look at the bench, like I don't know where to go. I mean, this guy can do this thing, sure, but then like he's going to drive me nuts this way. Like if you put Kevin Stevens out there, okay, well he doesn't have a ton of shot power, and he's not agile, and he's going to get super easily.
Yeah. So who's better as a team then, in your opinion, Quebec or Pittsburgh? Seems like they both have their issues. They should be able to, on paper, I've watched them play live those years, and they were fantastic teams. Actually, the Penguins were coming off just 2 back-to-back Stanley Cup wins. They got bounced by the Islanders that year, but nonetheless, who would you rather play with? Would you play with Quebec or Pittsburgh if you had a choice?
Quebec for sure. They have more options on the bench. So even if you don't like the starters, there's other guys that you can put in and they're like, okay, these guys are still pretty good. And they're not as heavy as Pittsburgh. They're not as slow as Pittsburgh. I think they're more consistent overall with their skills. The defense is not as good, obviously, and the goaltender's not as good, but I feel like they can mix and match their pieces a whole lot better. You get Kovalenko, he's a pretty good checker, so you can utilize him some way. You have so many good shooters. You got guys that can move the puck. They're just not very fast compared to the Vancouver, Detroit's, that echelon. But Quebec is definitely a scary team. If I had those 2 options, I'd quickly pick Quebec and feel very comfortable about it.
That's fair. Curious, what records do you hold, if any? Because I saw like on your YouTube channel, you had an unofficial record of the goal differential in Genesis, and I think it was 99 goals. But I know that record I think has been supplanted. I forget what the number is, but yeah. So I mean, I'm curious if you hold any records that you could lay claim to and say that that's mine and I still own that record.
Not officially in terms of most goals scored against the computer. I think it's like 106 or 107
something now. Like that. Yeah.
Yeah, it used to be 70 or 60, 69 or 70. I forget what it was that Raf had initially, but yeah, we've increased it by 37 goals over the last few years, just by identifying the trick to pull the goalie, where when you pull the goalie, you have maximum shot accuracy with your players on the ice. So
I didn't know that. So every player has maximum shot accuracy once you pull a goalie?
Even Al McInnes or Doug Wilson or whoever has low accuracy, they become a perfect accuracy shooter. Not just 100 overall, perfect. If there's an open space that their shot power can blast by the goalie, they will score. no questions asked, where if the goalie is still in the net and you do a slap shot, it'll go all over the place. Sometimes it goes in the net. Sometimes it goes in the middle of the goalie's chest. Sometimes it goes wide. Sometimes it goes high. Sometimes, it can do whatever it wants. It's much more volatile. Whereas if you pull the goalie, it's going to find that spot past the goalie every single time if their shot power can beat that goalie. So that's how we were able to increase our numbers by so much over that short amount of time. Was once we located that trick, it also became a much more boring experience playing the game that way, because all you do is you win the faceoff, you get it to one of your players, you do a slap shot, that's it. That's the whole strat. So
does that same advantage also apply to the computer? Because I know if they're 2 goals down, they'll pull the goalie as long as they have the puck in the attacking zone. Do they also get that same advantage where they have godlike shot accuracy with all their players?
I would presume. I don't know how the code reads it, but I'm going to assume that yes, you would have the same accuracy boost for the computer as you would for a human.
Oh. Do timeouts or changing goalies do anything in a game?
Well, changing goalie usually makes your goalie worse, so there's that.
Right. The backup tends to be worse than the starter, but is there a tactical advantage for you actually doing it?
Maybe mentally. You go, okay, I know my goalie's going to be bad, instead of, well, he should stop this because he's good. So maybe you make better decisions based off of that knowledge. Timeouts, we don't know if it does anything in non-line change games. I mean, obviously, it restores everybody's endurance in a line change game, but that's useless for our purposes since we very rarely play with line changes on. That's also just kind of a mental thing. It's like a mental reset. Guys will kid like, oh, if you take a timeout, I'm going to take my timeout to counteract your timeout. And I don't know if there's anything to that either. So I think it's more just for take a deep breath, especially in live play where like, okay, things are moving really fast. Couple BS goals. got to reframe the mindset here.
It's kind of like in real life. It just gives you a little bit of a breather mentally and try to reset. So we're past 50 minutes, and I don't want to take too much of your time. Respect, we booked an hour for this. I'm going to send you some rapid fire questions, and hopefully you could give me some answers. So let's dive into that one. Sure. Cam Neely, start or bench?
Oh God, on Boston. Bench, but I hate doing it because he's awesome. Actually, I actually learned to like him.
Which backup goalie do you prefer to play over the starter?
Berthwain over Sidorowicz in Ottawa.
Daniel the Bandit, I think that's it.
Yeah, Bandit. You're right.
Yeah. Who's better, Randy Wood or Brian Skrudland?
Skrudland. I like Skrudland. He's a smart guy. I can't stand Randy Wood. All he does is skate in straight lines.
But you have speed as one of your top attributes that you love, and he has that in spades.
He has it in spades, but his agility is so low that it counteracts his really high speed, and it's like, you're a hot mess out there. I can't handle you.
You gotta, if you're skating, you have to actually stop skating when you hit the blue line, and maybe you won't hit the board. I love playing with Randy Wood. He's so much fun. Do you prefer off-handed shooters on the wings? Example, do you prefer a left-handed shot on right wing and vice versa on left wing?
I don't have a preference, but it depends on who the player is. If he can shoot, I will generally put him on his off wing. If he's more of a puck hand like Dale Howardchuk, I prefer to have him on his natural wing because he'll be more able to utilize his passing and stick handling from there.
Most overrated player in a game?
Lindros.
And you can use whatever criteria you want to consider overrated.
If it's overrated by overall, Lindros for sure. He's very difficult to use. If we're talking about draft, Joe Sakic.
Why? Why would you consider him overrated? I'm curious your thoughts.
He just doesn't do anything at a high level. He's not worth his draft pick, I think. He's a very good player. I would take him as my second forward, but as a first forward where you generally have to take him, I don't want him leading my forwards.
Most underrated player, and use the same criteria.
In terms of draft position, underrated. Oh man, I don't even, because I feel like we've gotten to a point where we understand who's. I'll go Brendan Shanahan. I mean, he's like Lindros. They go in a pretty similar spot in the draft, but he's a little bit easier to handle. I think he's a little bit lighter. He still has all those same skills that Lindros has, and I really enjoy using him. Underrated in terms of the game, just overall. Moog, you look at him, he's a low 60s goalie. You use him, you go, man, this guy's great. He can start for me anytime.
From what I take, it sounds like a great manual goalie to play with, just given he's so light. 2 versus 2 or 5 versus 5? What's your preference?
5 versus 5 Genesis, 2 versus 2 Super Nintendo. I love 2-on-2 Super Nintendo. It's way better than Genesis, personally.
Genesis or Super Nintendo? What's your preference?
Genesis. I grew up with Genesis. I came on to Super Nintendo much later.
So for Genesis, 6-button or 3-button controller?
I prefer the 6-button just for the fit, but I did play a couple of live turns with the 3-button and had a good time with it. I was successful with it, so either works for me.
Funniest moment in a game you've ever seen? Something that just made you howl?
Probably the last King of '94. I think is the moment that comes to mind where Scribe and K is a Legend were playing in the loser final to go to the grand final. The penalty shot that they had, it's on YouTube somewhere. The penalty shot where I just remember going, I can't believe he dove and got that puck. That was insane. And the whole room was just like, what happened? This is crazy. We never seen this before. This shouldn't work. And it worked.
Cheapest move you've ever seen in NHL 94?
Pass shots.
Fair. Thoughts on NHL Rewind? I'm not sure if you even tried it out.
I did not try it out. As I mentioned before, I kind of stepped away from current gen sports games. I wanted to play Rewind. I really did. But once I learned that there was no online functionality, I didn't think there was much of a point to it because
they dropped the ball there.
Yeah,
it just seemed like a no-brainer. Everything is set up. They have the Microsoft ecosystem, which they could have tapped into. It would have been an absolute home run. That's a grand slam. How did he drop the ball so freaking bad? I don't know.
I mean, I get it if you're not in the online team like I have been all these years and go, oh, I could just play the computer or play with a friend or my brother or sister or whatever at the house. But I don't have anybody to play like that at the house, like at a high level. So what am I going to do? I can beat the goal. I can beat the game 20-0. I can pull my goalie and get it 60 goals. What am I going to do with this?
Yeah. If you could change anything in NHL 94, just something to improve it, what would you do?
Just put 95 features into 94. That's it. The game, for all of the things that break the game, they actually make the game more fun and deeper and more challenging to play in a positive way. I think it's not like, oh man, this game's broken, I can't play it, because it just doesn't work. Like, the game actually works with everything. Super Nintendo, there's fewer bugs, the game works. Genesis, there's more bugs, the game works. So I don't want to touch it, because I've seen people try to touch it in other ways, like, oh, let's reduce the hot and cold effect, let's make everybody the same every game. And I feel like that also wildly affects the game and maybe makes... I personally enjoy those type of versions less than the regular game, because we trick ourselves into thinking, oh, it's going to react a certain way this game, and then it doesn't. It's like, okay, then why did we bother with something that we all grew up playing and loving and spending all our time on? So I would just put 95 features in 94. I love season. I love being able to trade players, create players, free agents. Like, I created so many players in like the 92 expansion Sharks. I would put them into the game and play with them and like give myself a challenge, or trade for all the crappy players in a season mode and give myself a challenge, because that was, just what I had to do back when I was younger, when there wasn't really anybody to actually play the game with.
You're part of it. I don't want to say the wrong part of the country. I mean, California is great, but for playing NHL 94, man, there's other parts of the continent you would have just been, right at home if you were there, unfortunately. But it is what it is. What about fighting? Wouldn't you like to have seen fighting in 94? I mean, you're of the vintage. You played the original NHL Hockey 92, and they had it there, and they also had it in NHL PA 93. So, thoughts on that?
I think it'd be fun to have it as an option. If it was league play, I'd probably leave it off. But for fun exhibitions or for fun side tournaments, I think turning it on would be great. It just takes a little bit more time to play the game. Is also it's tougher these days when our schedule is a little bit tighter, or we have some of these leagues have 40, 50, 60 games in them, and then you have playoffs, and they can be very time consuming as it is. So I just think having the option to turn it on and off like they did in '93 would have been the way to go.
So we're up against an hour here. I guess, do you have any last words you want to say? Anything where people could find you if they have any questions? The floor is yours.
I don't necessarily have places where people can find me aside from the Discord. Obviously, if you're on the Discord, you're more than welcome to message me for just about any reason, especially if it's 94 related, but if it's also just other video games or other interests. Like I've had people talk to me about cycling on the Discord because I do like to cycle. So, it doesn't always have to be 94 related. Sometimes it could just be something, completely different. Like, but yeah, online, you can see me. I'll join in on some streams for certain leagues. We do the CDL draft show for the Chaos Draft League that we run online. Was a part of that stream just a couple days ago, actually. So that's where we have 26 players sign up for a league. We all draft a team from the default 94 rosters, and then we also have a C League that participates and drafts the teams that the other guys drafted the players for. So it's a big deal. So you can find me on that type of thing as well. And just as a final word, like, if you're in 94 can be whatever you want it to be. It doesn't have to be something where you're uber competitive at. You can use it just to play at a casual level. You could use it as a hobby. You could use it just to kind of have time with other people and have a common interest. You can make it whatever you want it to be. I feel like some people, they get so involved in like, oh, I have to be the best. I was the best growing up, or I was the best in college, or whatever it is. It doesn't have to be like that. And there's something here for all of us. And some people, it takes time to find what it is. I mean, I would probably never do a podcast of my own, but you're doing it. That's what you're finding here is part of 94 for you. And there may be other things past that once, you start playing and you find that your skill level is rising. There may be other things that open up, kind of like, just, it could be whatever you want it to be. I think we get so focused on very narrow-minded things in our lives that, there's so much here to enjoy and to have nostalgic memories about. And that would just be my recommendation for everybody.
Yeah, the community is incredible, and there's a lot that it could be given, a lot to be taken, and yeah, I'm happy to be part of it now, and everybody's just so very thankful. And I also want to thank you, Angryjay93, for coming on the NHL 94 podcast. It's been a great discussion. We've been a little bit over an hour, so I want to thank you for taking your time to talk about this, and maybe we could do this again in a not too distant future if you're okay with that.
Yeah, I'd be happy to come back anytime you asked, and thank you for having me in this instance, and was very happy to join you today.
Perfect. Well, with that, keep your stick on the ice and your controller plugged in. Take care.